Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for the 2022 Idaho Republican Primary Candidate Forum. My name's Daniel Silver, and I'll be your host for this evening. First, I know you had a lot of things you could be doing tonight, and we want to thank you for joining us. It's a really important thing that we're going to be watching tonight. We're going to be meeting with every single candidate who's running for statewide and federal office. And that person has the opportunity to represent you and me and all of Idaho for the next 2, 4, or even 6 years, depending upon the position. It's not something we should take lightly. So what we're going to be doing is sitting down for about 10 minutes with each of them tonight, and we're going to hear what's on their heart, learn a little bit about them, learn where they think things are going well or not within Idaho, and if given the opportunity, where would they take us in the future. Now, before we start, though, it's important to know that as an organization, Idaho Young Republicans does not endorse any candidate during the primary season. That's not our role. Instead, we want to make sure that you're as informed as you can be. And so that's our hope, that you get an opportunity tonight to learn about each and every candidate, and then you know what's best for you and your family. You know what's best to take you into the future. We just hope we can make that decision a little easier for you. So the next race we're going to pivot to is Attorney General. Now, if you remember the 2020 elections, Attorney Generals became really, really important. They always have been, but became in the news a lot with lawsuits and directions that they could take both with the state, with federal government, et cetera. And so it's a really important position. They are the top litigator, the top attorney for the state of Idaho. And for this race, we have 3 different candidates. The first one is Art McAmer. Art, first, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm very happily married for 30 years, have 2 grown children in master's programs at the U of I. I've been a civil litigator up in Coeur d'Alene for 15 years, been to the state Supreme Court 5 times with 1 case pending a hearing. And so I'm thoroughly soaked in the rules of the courts, and I look at and I think I'm in a good position to help Idaho.
So being the chief litigator responsible for Idaho, obviously it's a legal role. You have to have a lot of qualifications. What makes you uniquely skill-setted for this role?
Well, first of all, I've filed probably, I want to say hundreds of lawsuits, but even if it was only dozens, you learn how to interpret people that you're taking to court. And sometimes you just need to take people to court. There's no nice guy talking them out of it. You just go to court. So that uniquely qualifies me because I've been up to my eyeballs in court actions in Idaho for well over a decade. I have also studied the federal and the state constitutions and their relationship, and I actually wrote the 2018 Idaho Constitutional Amendment, which is now Section 29 of Article 3, that reins in Brad Little's executive power. So I've already been fighting for the people of Idaho. I might as well just get in the seat and keep going.
So Attorney General, obviously a very law-defined role, representing the legislature and the executive branch, in particular maybe the governor and others. We have over 8 candidates that are running for office today for governor. We saw it today in this last legislative session where sometimes the House and the Senate disagrees. A lot of different opinions and ideas and personalities. Not better or worse, just different. As Attorney General, how do you balance your own personal viewpoint versus your clients when sometimes, again, depending upon who gets elected, they may not jive with each other? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, the personal viewpoint of the Attorney General is irrelevant. What the Attorney General's viewpoint is the law. That's the opinion. So let's take a look at what this job is. This is the job of an elected official. So when we talk about the state of Idaho, we have to include the people. And how do we do that? Because we can't run lawsuits for all the people of Idaho, of course. But what we must do, well, here's the third thing. We can't have a private attorney-client relationship with the governor, whoever it is. That is really not this job. There's actually, as an elected official, there's the Idaho Constitution, which the Attorney General takes an oath to, by the way, and then there's the governor. And so this is where the balance has to take place. And I'll give you an example. If the governor comes to me and says, Art, we have this COVID disease. We don't know what it is. It's scaring us. Even the doctors can't tell us what to do. I want to close the churches. I want to close the businesses. I want to close all of this. And I say, well, Governor, the Idaho Constitution, remember, is a limitation on state power. And as such, the Article 1 rights of the citizens to exercise their rights of faith is guaranteed. So I don't think you can close churches. I think what you need to do is talk to Idaho citizens as adults and maybe talk them into closing the churches for a time. You could say, well, we don't know what this disease is, but we're assessing it, and during this time for 30 to 60 days, according to statute for the state of emergency, we think it would be prudent for you to close your churches. Now, in my view, I think the people of Idaho probably would have done that. I've traveled around the state for over a year, and these are very reasonable, very intelligent people. So give them their due. But the job itself has to do with explaining to the governor what the law is, and then good attorneys help their clients understand why it's important to stay within the bounds of the law. In other words, we say, so if you don't obey the law, here's what happens. If you do obey the law, here's what happens. And is there a third path, which is always do nothing, which of course nobody ever wants to do, but it's still there. I mean, the governor could have done nothing, but okay. Well, here's a second example. If a governor takes federal funds, say millions of dollars of federal funds during a state of emergency, and then allocates them and distributes them by himself or herself or with a little group that they form, however it's done, and they don't get enabling legislation for those allocations from the legislature, then that would be an unconstitutional distribution and allocation of federal funds. My job would be to point that out and say, look, as these funds come in, you need to reconvene the legislature to get them to help you to make those appropriations so that the functions of the Idaho Republic remain intact. They pass a bill, you either veto it or approve it. If you approve it, it becomes law. If it's about money, the allocations go out. This is the way our Constitution works, and we need to get back to these anchors. When you leave the anchors of your legal basis, when you leave your legal structures behind, you always get in trouble. And that's why I say, Idaho's in trouble, we need a new Attorney General.
Kind of expand upon that note a little bit, as we reach out to members, as we talk to Idahoans across the state as well, one of the things they are concerned about is the amount of federal overreach within the Biden administration. As Attorney General in this role, part of that responsibility is protecting Idaho's sovereignty, which may be at the Supreme Court level of the United States. Where do you see as some of the biggest issues today? And if elected, where would you start? What would you do to protect Idaho's sovereignty?
There's an interesting phenomenon going on here, because the extension and the growth and power of the federal government has been going on since essentially the late 1930s. And now it's to the point where it's actually reaching into our homes and our businesses. And so suddenly people are saying, gosh, there's federal overreach. Well, we've actually had it for a while. So if we start to look at those things, and I'll give you an example. The first thing was the OSHA mandates for taking a vaccine. And then the mandates as you recall, the hospital providers and the hospital workers had to take the vaccine, but people in companies where there was over 100 employees did not. But my first question was, wait, occupational health and safety, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Why does the federal government get involved in health and safety? Everyone knows the police power of the states is health, safety, nuisance, and morality. That's been our power since 1787. So why does the federal government have a health and safety function? And when you look at the federal statutes, it says, well, occupational injury and disease negatively impact, guess? Oh, I'll tell you, interstate commerce. So through the Interstate Commerce Clause of the federal Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, they have expanded the power and scope of the federal government for 80 years. Only now when it comes home, only now when employees at INL are being told, you take this shot or you get fired. And a lot of them did get fired. A lot of people got fired throughout Idaho. And so, the first thing is, Idaho is responsible for the health and safety of its citizens, not the federal power. So that's one thing immediately. The second thing is election integrity. They want to use Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the federal Constitution, which says the legislatures of the states handle the time, place, and manner for elections. They want to use everything after the comma, which says, and Congress may make additional rules about this. Well, Congress wants to say, we're taking them over for you. We don't want voter ID. We want there to be drop boxes in every neighborhood, and anybody could just put in any votes that they want. We want essentially a federal takeover of elections. Now this got beaten back recently in the Senate, of course, because the Senate is supposed to be where the states are represented. But it's coming back again. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see it come back this summer. And so the Senate has to hold very firm, or else Idaho has to hold firm. And Idaho would have to sue the federal government and say, no, the federal Constitution makes sense in this, when the states formed and ratified the federal power to even exist. The states gave up certain things, and the states benefited from certain things. And we don't get to coin our own money, okay? We don't get to have our own armies, okay. But we do get to set the voting rules. And so election integrity in Idaho is very important. We have to fight back against that too.
Last question, knowing that a lot of times people, they hear things in the news, they see things on social media, and there's usually some version of it that's true and not true, all that other stuff. As voters head into the primary this next week, what do you want to leave them? What message do you want to leave them with? What should they know about art? Why should they consider you when they go into the voting booth? And what should they take away?
There are two takeaways that I think are critical. Number one is that the Attorney General's job is different from any other job in the executive branch and any job in the legislature in that it is not a policy job. The Attorney General does not make policy. We don't consider policy. It's not our job. The legislature is supposed to use policy, make the law according to the will of the people, and then it comes over to the executive branch for enforcement. So this is the key takeaway. It's a law job, it's not a policy job. So if you have candidates running that are law-focused, law expertise runs high, law is what they think about all the time. Law is where their primary fidelity is too. And if you have other candidates for the job who are policy-oriented, have always been policy-oriented, who are considering their donors' interests, something like this, you don't want the policy people, you want the law people. So that's number one. Number two, the people of Idaho need to recognize that they really want a fighter in the position. That is somebody who understands that filing lawsuits is one of the primary duties. Now, there's 130 attorneys in the AG's office. The legislature in 1997 had all the attorneys plunked into the AG's office. So if you wonder why the executive is way up here and the legislature is way down here in terms of power in our republic, one thing that lends to that is that they don't have their own attorneys in-house. So my plan is this. Of the 130 attorneys in the office, I'm going to assess what portion of that work is actually work for the legislature, whatever it is. Then those attorneys are going to get cut from my budget and they'll go back to the legislature. We need a legislative counsel's office so that when Megan Blanksma or whoever is in the legislature at all wants to get a legal opinion on the laws they're creating, they'll be able to do that with an attorney-client privilege thing, and then the law gets printed, and then it becomes an RS and it becomes public. But without those legal opinions, the legislature is at a real deficit at making good law. Now, here's the second part of the plan. You remember I wrote the 2018 constitutional amendment. That allows the legislature to revise and repeal executive branch rules, what we call the IDAPA rules, the Idaho Administrative Procedure Act rules. There are 722 sets of these rules, Daniel, for 1.8 million people. So the second part of my plan is, and I would recommend this to the legislature, although I can't control it from the AG's office, is that the Legislative Counsel's Office in the legislature helps the legislators make better law. It helps the interim committees in the off session, but then it turns its big guns on the executive branch IDAPA rules and says, how can we really cut back this regulation from the executive? And I think that's going to be very, very important. So in addition to that, which is moving the attorneys around so that we get a better balance in our republic, is I want to have a strike force of attorneys that monitor federal and state cases. And when Idaho and executive orders, of course, everything coming out of the Biden White House, or any White House, frankly, where Idaho state sovereignty needs to be supported and re-energized, we're going to get into those cases. So we're either going to initiate cases, we're going to join cases, we might file amicus briefs. We might recommend the court take a little different view of who the parties should be. So that, in cases like Texas versus Pennsylvania, the whole Republic of Texas sued the whole Republic of Pennsylvania and the other 4 states. What really should have happened, in my view, was the legislature of Texas should have sued the executive and judicial branches of Pennsylvania and then called for the court to join in the legislature of Pennsylvania with it, because that was that Article 1, Section 4 place where, and of course the US Supreme Court threw it out, no standing. Well, probably the whole Republic of Texas did not have standing. That's probably a good ruling. But I think the legislature, so, you need to be a practicing attorney to see these things. And, surely Ken Paxton of Texas is a practicing attorney, but somebody in that office didn't think this through and the case got dismissed. I don't think it should have been dismissed. So we need somebody who can provide thought leadership and direction to the attorneys in the AG's office. If you in any profession, say at a hospital, the head surgeon, all the other surgeons come to the head surgeon and go, boy, I got this difficult issue. Here's the chart, here's the thing, what should I do? That's the type of leadership I can provide to the deputy attorney generals in the AG's office. They come to me and say, Art, we don't really know the best argument to make in this case. What do you think? And we always get a second set of eyes on things like this because they are critical to Idaho state sovereignty. So those 2 things are the clearest thing. It's a law job, it's not a policy job. And number 2, we need to move some attorneys around, reinvigorate our republic, and then go to battle for the people of Idaho. We need to reinvigorate that 10th Amendment.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better, and thank you for spending the time. And good luck in a week.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Take care. So up next, we have candidate Raul Labrador running for Attorney General. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here, man.
So let's start off with an easy one. Tell us about you.
I'm a father, a husband, a grandfather now. I have 5 kids, 2 grandkids, and 1 grandchild on the way. I'm a lawyer. Obviously, I'm running for Attorney General. I grew up in Puerto Rico. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I moved to the mainland when I was in high school, graduated from Las Vegas High School, then went to college in Utah. And in Utah, I met a young, beautiful woman from Boise, Idaho. And now we have been married for 30 years, and the rest is history. She made me a better person, and I'm able to live in a wonderful state like Idaho that has completely changed my life. So it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful life.
So being the chief litigator responsible for Idaho, obviously it's a legal role. You have to have a lot of qualifications. What makes you uniquely skill-setted for this role?
I actually have the perfect qualifications for this job because I was a practicing lawyer for 15 years. I had my own law practice. I had a law firm with 3 attorneys and 5 paralegals. I practiced immigration law and criminal law. Immigration law is actually a very difficult statutory law. It's a very difficult law that deals with policy making, regulatory law, and that's what the Attorney General does. They deal with regulatory law all day long. The Supreme Court and a bunch of legal scholars have said that immigration law is probably the second most difficult law in the United States. Number one being tax law, and number two being immigration law, because it changes all the time. So to be a good immigration lawyer, you have to be pretty wise. You got to have to be really smart. You have to be pretty perceptive about changes in the law, and that's what a good attorney general should do. And obviously, an attorney general also deals with criminal issues, and I was a criminal lawyer, so those are two really important things that an attorney general does. But the attorney general also deals with politics a lot, and deals with different branches of government. They have to deal with the legislature. They have to deal with Congress. With the legislature and with the governor, and with other executive offices in the state. And as you know, I have extensive experience in Washington, D.C. and in the state as a legislator. I was 4 years state legislator here in Idaho, and then I was 8 years as a congressman in Washington, D.C. So those relationships that I have, all those experiences that I have will make me a really strong attorney general. And in fact, the people of Idaho and the legislature, they're ready for a new attorney general. As you know, this attorney general has been in office for 20 years. He's been the sitting attorney general for 20 years, and before that, he was a deputy attorney general for 10. So he's been a bureaucrat really for 30 years. And most legislators want a new attorney general because they don't deal with that office very well. They think they're getting bad legal advice from the office. They don't always get a lot of help from that office, and they're looking for somebody that can actually help them just do a better job for the state of Idaho.
So, mentioning all the different groups that you serve as part of the state, I think there's upwards of 8 candidates running for governor. All of them have different opinions and views. How do you balance that? Because they're not right or wrong; they're just different viewpoints. How do you balance your own personal viewpoint versus what might be, say, Governor A, B, C, D, E, and if those are in conflict with each other?
Yeah, no, I think that's the most important thing. I think that's my biggest strength, is that I have no problem being strong in the things that I believe in, but I also like to work with people. I like people. So working with people is one of the things that I like doing the most, and I don't mind disagreeing with somebody and having a strong conversation with somebody, but I always try to do it with a smile. I always try to do it in a pleasant way. I try to be cordial in the things that I do, and I just outline the things that I think are important for the state. So I don't have a problem working with anybody. I think some other people have had a problem working with me because there's a lot of people in politics who don't like people to disagree with them. And I have no problem disagreeing with people, and I don't have problems when people disagree with me. I actually find some of the best conversations I've had in politics is with somebody who completely disagrees with me, when they want to really have a conversation, not when they're trying to lecture you. When somebody's trying to lecture you, I think that makes it very difficult in politics. And frankly, it's one of the issues that many legislators and many people in Idaho have with our current attorney general. Whenever you disagree with him, he loves to tell people, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a lawyer. I have never used that phrase in my entire life, that somebody doesn't know what they're talking about because they're not a lawyer. I think that's a very condescending way to deal with people, and I don't think we need to do that. I think I can outline the reasons why I believe something with somebody really well, and I'm willing to listen to what the other people are trying to say, because a lot of times you learn from other people who disagree with you.
One of the other things we hear from our members and Idahoans across the state is, especially with the Biden administration the last year and with COVID and things, is just the amount of federal overreach. How do we protect Idaho's sovereignty, and how do you go about doing some of that?
Idaho needs an aggressive attorney general. One of the biggest differences I have with this attorney general is that he's not been aggressive enough, has not taken on the Biden administration enough. He has, in the last 6 months, joined a lot of lawsuits that I don't think he would have joined in the past because he wasn't being challenged by somebody strong. But I think an attorney general is probably the most important position that we have in the state right now, because the Biden administration every single day is trying to do things to take away our rights and our sovereignty. Just last week, just a few days ago, the Biden administration started with new regulations on gun control. So whatever they can't get passed through the legislative process, they're going to do through executive orders. And you need an aggressive attorney general who's willing to, every single time that he does something that crosses the line, that takes them on. I have relationships with multiple attorneys general throughout the United States. In fact, I have two really good friends that I served with in Congress that are attorneys general in Louisiana and Indiana, that they're the ones who encourage me to run for attorney general because they feel that they don't have a partner in the attorney general in the state of Idaho. And they know that with me, they will have a partner, because what you do as attorney general is you join with all these other attorneys general and you take on the Biden administration. And they do that regularly. And I would be joining them in those fights. But it's really important executive overreach at the state level as well. You know, and a good, strong attorney general should not be a yes man for the governor or for the executive branch. In my opinion, the role of the attorney general is to ensure that the executive branch is not overreaching and not violating the constitutional rights of the people of Idaho or violating separation of powers. And in the state of Idaho, over the last 2 years, you've had an executive branch that has actually violated separation of powers many, many times and not reached out to the legislature. This attorney general has been a yes man to the governor. I would actually be a person who would tell the governor, whoever the governor is after this election, that they cannot do certain things that the Constitution and the statutes do not let them do.
Thanks for those answers. One last one just to wrap up. And again, a week from today, everyone's going to the voting booths for the primaries. What message do you want to walk away with? What do you want them to walk away with before they walk into those booths?
You know, I love the people of Idaho. I love the state of Idaho. I have served the state of Idaho in different capacities, and I've been proud of the things that I have done. I think the people of Idaho have been excited about the things that I have done in Congress, in the legislature, and I think it's time for a change in the Attorney General's office. When you have a person who's been there for 30 years, I think that person becomes stale. I actually have a friend who approached me the other day and said that he went to law school with the current Attorney General, and he likes the current Attorney General, but he found that the Attorney General has changed in the 30 years that he's been in that office because he's been there too long. I think it's time for a new Attorney General, somebody who's going to be aggressive, who's going to protect the sovereignty and the rights of the people of Idaho and the state of Idaho, and I think I'm that man, so I hope to get your trust and your support, and thanks for listening.
Attorney General candidate Raul Labrador. Raul, thank you again for coming in.
It's great to be with you.
So next we're talking with Lawrence Bosden. Lawrence, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. So let's just start off with a real tricky one. Tell us about you.
Well, I'm born in Idaho, about as Idaho as you can get. Lived my young life in Nampa, for a few years in Caldwell, back to Nampa, went to junior high and high school in Twin Falls, and went to school at BYU and then the University of Idaho to law school. My wife and I have made our home in Idaho. My first job was in Canyon County as a deputy prosecutor. I had a private practice in Nampa. I was an associate at Hamilton, Clark, and Michelson, and also concurrently was the Owyhee County prosecuting attorney. Then got into a really ugly murder case. It was the murder of a police informant and very involved case. Ended up, that case went to trial after I left office. I was hired by Attorney General Jim Jones, and then worked for Attorney General Larry Echohawk, and then Attorney General Al Lance. I was a line deputy, a supervising deputy, and ultimately the chief of staff for my predecessor. Ran for the office in 2002 and was elected in took office in 2003. And I've been the Attorney General ever since.
Well, it kind of leads me into my next question, although you kind of talked about it, and that is, when you think about the Attorney General role, right, the chief litigator of the state, defender of Idaho's freedom, what makes you uniquely qualified?
Well, my experience makes me uniquely qualified. And you said chief litigator, and that is true. There's some who believe that the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer, and that's not technically correct. The chief law enforcement officer is the head of the state police, and he answers to the governor. My job is as the head lawyer for the state, the attorney for the state. And that's specifically what the law provides. What the law says is that my duty is to represent the state and its agencies and offices and officers and boards and commissions. That's the specific language of the statute. and says that I represent other state entities. So I am uniquely qualified because I've done that for 20 years. And that is one of the challenging questions that an attorney general always has to deal with, and that is, where's your client? Who is your client? And there are occasions when I definitely have a statutorily identified client, and sometimes it is the state itself, which again is, for me, is a statutorily defined client. And so that's what makes me uniquely qualified, is that's precisely what I have done. I've done it for a long time. I understand how to do it. My office is about 220 people, about 120 lawyers. I have offices in Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Caldwell, Boise, Twin Falls, Pocatello, and Idaho Falls. So it's a very large operation. Every legal issue that the state is involved in, we are involved in. So it is a very challenging job, and it's something that I've done for a long time, and that's unique. One of the other uniquenesses is that I have served as a prosecutor, both in Canyon and Owyhee counties. I'm the only prosecutor in this race. That is a significant function of what the Office of the Attorney General does in doing special prosecutions. We do about 150 to 200 of those a year. We also do about somewhere between 800 and 1,000 criminal appeals every year. So criminal law is also a good background that I have to bring to this job.
So, mentioned, all the different groups that you serve as part of the state. I think there's upwards of 8 candidates running for governor. All of them have different opinions and views. How do you balance that? Because they're not right or wrong; they're just different viewpoints. How do you balance your own personal viewpoint versus what might be, say, Governor A, B, C, D, E, and if those are in conflict with each other?
That's a very important function of the Attorney General. The Attorney General is not a policymaker. Some people say that, and they give lip service to that concept, but they don't actually want to fulfill it. And that is, as the Attorney General, when the law says that I represent the governor, and it does say that, so when the governor asks for me to provide him legal advice, I'm required by the law to do that. I don't get to sidestep it. I don't get to say no. My job is to be the lawyer for the governor or for my other statutory clients. And so when they have a view that is different from mine, their view prevails. And that's how it should be. I'm the lawyer. I do 2 things. I give them legal advice, which they can accept or reject, and then I represent them in court after they've made that decision. Some people have said, well, why didn't you sue the governor? Well, that's a very simple reason why I didn't sue the governor. It's because the governor is my client, and it's illegal for me to sue him. It would be a violation of my oath of office, and it would be a violation of my oath as an attorney to sue the governor. I don't get to hold a press conference and say, the governor was wrong. That, again, would be a violation of my duty as an attorney. So it's very simple, and that is that in the policymaking arena, the policymakers reign supreme. They get to say what the policy is. I advise, they make decision, then I litigate. And that's how it works.
So it's one of the other things we hear from our members and Idahoans across the state is, especially with the Biden administration the last year and with COVID and things, is just the amount of federal overreach. How do we protect Idaho's sovereignty, and how do you go about doing some of that?
That's a great question, and I want to draw a distinction. It's not always federal overreach. It can be state overreach as well. Very good example of that is what happened 2 years ago in 2020, December of 2020, when Texas filed a lawsuit against Pennsylvania and other states. The question in that case was not the efficacy of the 2020 presidential election. Instead, the question in that case was, can one sovereign state, that is Texas, sue another sovereign state, that is Pennsylvania and other states, for that state's exercise of its sovereign power? The answer to that question is no. In fact, all 9 members of the United States Supreme Court answered that question and said, I was right. I did not join that case because Texas didn't have the ability to sue Pennsylvania over Pennsylvania's exercise of its sovereign power. Think about that for a moment. If Texas can sue Pennsylvania for exercising its sovereign power, then California can sue us for the exercise of our sovereign power. I don't think California should be able to control Idaho, and I believe you feel the same way. federalism is not just that we have a national government and state governments, but that we have independent state governments. None of them gets to control the others. That is, California can't control Idaho, but Idaho can't control Pennsylvania. That's why I did not join. And nearly alone, I'm the one who stood up for Idaho's sovereignty. Now, we have a number of other federal cases. I sued the Obama administration, the Biden administration. I also sued the Obama administration, but I sued the Biden administration when they issued a directive to OSHA to require vaccinations for all companies with more than 100 employees. Why did we do that? It's because it's beyond the scope of authority that OSHA has. And the state has responsibility with regard to protecting the health, safety, and welfare and morals of the people. It's called the police power. So we did sue OSHA. We took that all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, we'll issue a stay of the rules promulgated by OSHA because that is beyond the scope of authority that OSHA has. And we also did the same thing with regard to, we sued on the CMS case, we sued on the state contractors or the federal contractors case. So there's a variety of instances in which we sue, but it really matters, what are the facts, what is the law, and if we have the facts in the law and there's a violation of law, we then have a cause of action. Sometimes we have that, sometimes we don't. So sometimes we join a case, other times we don't. The facts and the law may be different in other states. The state of Louisiana is an example with its Head Start program. Very different from what happens in Idaho. In Idaho, Head Start is a federally run program. It is not a state program. That's not how it is in Louisiana. In that whole context, I represent the state and state agencies, but I represent all of Idaho, all of its citizens collectively, not individually. I don't represent you on your divorce or your lot line dispute or your contract dispute, but I represent us all collectively, and that's how the law says that I have my responsibility. That's specifically what the law says is my duty. So that's how we protect the sovereignty of the state of Idaho.
Thanks for those answers. One last one just to wrap up. And again, a week from today, everyone's going to the voting booths for the primaries. What message do you want to walk away with? What do you want them to walk away with before they walk into those booths?
The most significant issue in this race is the rule of law. Either we have an attorney general who is willing to take the hard knocks, make the hard decisions, and uphold the rule of law, or we don't. Either we believe in the rule of law or we don't. When the law says that the Attorney General's duty is to represent the state and state agencies, that means that we don't get to just choose to ignore that. That means that we're stuck, in a sense, with what that law says. When the law says that Roe versus Wade is the law of this country, whether I agree or disagree with that, and I do disagree, and I think the Supreme Court is wrong, but when the court says that's the law, then that's the law. And so when I render an opinion based upon that, then I have to render that opinion based on the law, not what's politically good for me, not what is politically popular with other people. I try to say it this way, and that is that it's like you and I are in a car. We're driving down the road. We look up, we see a traffic signal. I notice that it's red. You turn to me and you say, "What color is the light?" I have one of two answers I can give you. I can tell you the truth, and I can say the light is red, and you get angry, and you say, well, that's simply because you're a red light lover. Or I can lie to you, and I can tell you the light is green, and you slap me on the back, and you say, you're a great patriot. The problem is, if I'm willing to lie to you, it doesn't change the color of the light. The light is still red, and when you drive through the intersection, you're going to get hit. I don't serve your interest by telling you what you want to hear. I only serve your interest by telling you what you need to know. That's the upholding the rule of law. That's the significant factor in this case. Others have said, well, when I'm elected, we'll finally have a conservative attorney general. The problem is, as the attorney general, when I've stood on the State House steps and taken an oath, my oath is to uphold the Constitution and of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Idaho, and to perform my duties as they're prescribed by law. I don't represent Democrats or Republicans or libertarians or moderates or liberals or conservatives. My job is to represent the state. It is to uphold the law. And if the law is in our favor, great. And if it isn't in our favor, then that's what we do. The significant difference in this race is that I am, have, and will continue to uphold the rule of law, not the rule of whim, and not the rule of politics, because I have a proven 20-year record of making hard decisions, telling people what they need to know rather than what they want to hear. Do we help people draft legislation so that they can improve it? Absolutely. But you sometimes have to tell your client, you just can't do that. And sometimes you can tell them, hey, here's a better way. Maybe we can do it this way. What's the significant difference in this whole race? The rule of law. I have a very proven track record. Abraham Lincoln said, put your feet in the right place and stand firm. That's what I have done. That's what I will continue to do. I ask for your vote.
Lawrence Wasden, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Before we close, there's two things I want to remind you of. First, please don't forget to get out there and vote 1 week from today on May 17th. Regardless of who you're voting for, it's important to have your voice heard. That person has an opportunity to represent you and me and the entire state for the next 2, 4, or 6 years, and we need to take that seriously. The last thing is really to remind you that on May 18th, we all need to wake up, regardless of who wins the primary, and support that candidate. For all the differences, for all the uniqueness that God made with each of us, we're still one Republican Party. We have way more in common than we have apart. And so no matter who wins, I want to ask you to rally behind them, just like we will with Idaho Young Republicans, just like we will with the state party. And we're going to get out there and do everything we can to help that candidate win the election in November. That's how we keep conservative values alive in the state. That's how we keep Idaho red. For all that, I want to say thank you again. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care, God bless, and God bless Idaho.